We're starting.
Hello, everyone. I am waiting for our participants to join us. As soon as I see that number stabilized, we will go ahead and get started. So just give us another couple of moments here, please. Okay, it looks as though we've hit a stabilized number. So good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment today. My name is Tracy Marshall, and I serve as the Division Director for CDLE's Division of Family and Medical Leave Insurance. And I'm here today along with my team to guide our discussion on registering your business on our employer services portal, which is called My Family Plus Employer. It's a very easy process, and I will help you today to get all set up. And then we will make time at the end to answer any questions that you may have. So before we get started, some quick housekeeping points. This presentation will be available on family.colorado.gov shortly following today's webinar. We'll also share it with everyone who is registered. Please make sure you ask your questions using the Q&A function of the Zoom meeting, as we have disabled chat. With so many people wanting to join us today, it's likely that we will not get to every question, but we will do our best to get through as many as possible in the 30 minutes that we have together, and we will include some unanswered questions in our next recorded webinar. We do also have another live webinar happening later this month, in which you're welcome to ask any additional questions. And you can also find recordings of our previous webinars on our YouTube channel that cover a variety of different topics. So let's dive right in. So to get us started, the first thing you will want to do is navigate to family.colorado.gov to find our My Family Plus employer page. There you'll find several materials, including our how-to guides that will help you use My Family Plus Employer. Clicking on the Login to My Family Employer button will take you to the portal's welcome page that looks like this. When you visit for the first time and need to create an account, you're going to click Create an Account, which is underneath the main Sign In with Login.gov button. After your account is created, you will click Sign In with Login.gov any other time you need to sign in to the My Family Plus Employer portal. So how do you create your account with Login.gov? So login.gov is there to ensure that your account information is kept private and secure, because it does provide multi-factor authentication, which adds an additional layer of security to your account. Since you are creating a new account, you're going to want to click the Create Account button on the login.gov sign-in page. When you arrive at the Create Your Account page, enter the email that you wish to use for your family account, select your preferred language, and then click Submit. Login.gov will send you an email to confirm your email address. If you find that email and click the Confirm Email Address button, that will take you back to login.gov, where you will then create your password. After you create a password, login.gov will prompt you to set up an authentication method. You'll need to select your preferred method and follow along with the prompts on the screen. Once you've successfully authenticated your account with login.gov, you'll be sent back to My Family Plus Employer to finish the registration process. First of all, you'll enter your name and contact information to set up your user profile. This user profile will be the primary account administrator in My Family Plus Employer for your business. Then you can identify whether you are an individual employer, a third-party administrator, a local government employer, whether you're self-employed or if you're an employee of an opted-out local government. A quick reminder, self-employed individuals and employees of opted-out local governments do not need to take any action until 2024, when they can self-elect coverage once benefits become available. So once you have selected your organization type, click No when it asks whether you are a third-party administrator registering on behalf of this organization. A quick note to our TPAs out there, you're going to come back to this and click Yes once you're ready to register on behalf of all of your clients. First, you will need to register your own TPA as a business. So now you're going to need to link your business to your account by searching for your Federal Employer Identification Number, or FEIN. Since you're registering for the first time, you'll need to add your business identification information by entering your business's legal name, your Federal Employer Identification Number, and your business's primary location and mailing address if that happens to be different to the primary location. Next, you'll enter additional information about your business. This includes what industry you're in, whether or not you are a seasonal employer, and whether you have 9 or fewer total employees or 10 or more total employees. Make sure that you include the total number of employees that work for your organization nationwide, not just your employees in Colorado. We have more information on counting your employees on famli.colorado.gov. Okay, you are almost done. Here you can add additional users to your account, and you can give them different permission levels, or you can skip this step completely and come back to it later. Now, all you need to do is take a moment to review your business information to make sure that everything looks correct. Check the boxes, the attestations at the bottom of the screen, and then click Submit. It's that simple. You are now registered with My FAMLI Plus Employer. You can now click on your dashboard, and that's where you'll be able to manage your account going forward. This is where you'll eventually upload your wage reports and submit premium payments next year. I will wrap up by directing you to our additional online resources. On our My FAMLI Plus Employer page, you'll find step-by-step instructions for employers, local governments, and TPAs. We also have how-to videos on how to register and how to submit your opt-out letters if you are a local government employer that has opted out. The checklist for everything you'll need to have handy when you register can also be found on our resource guides. We also have 2 additional quick reference guides for TPAs. They include the file specifications for TPAs and also sample file templates for those TPAs who wish to bulk register on behalf of the employers they serve. We do want to get to as many questions as possible. If for some reason we're not able to get to your question today, like I said earlier, you'll have another opportunity to engage with us during another live webinar later this month. And you can also reach out to us at the email address on your screen or by telephone Monday through Friday between the hours of 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. So I will now hand us over to Jessica from our communications team, and she's going to help moderate any questions that have come through.
Thanks, Tracy. We have quite a bit of questions coming in through the Q&A, so we will get to as many as we can. I will ask that anyone on my team that is able to answer, if you could turn your camera off before you unmute so we can see your face as you speak. We have one here from Janice. Janice asking, I work for a state agency. Do the state agencies have to enroll, or are they automatically enrolled as a state agency? Evan, are you able to take that one?
Sure. I mean, my understanding is that all employers have to register with the system, and there is no automatic enrollment. So, so yes, your employer would have to register with the system.
Thank you, Evan. Marcy is asking if the employer decides to pay the entire 0.9%, is that taxable to the employee? Evan, do you want to take that one as well?
Sure. Unfortunately, that's not something that we can answer because we don't govern the taxability of anything, frankly. So the answer to that would unfortunately have to be answered by, a tax professional or the IRS.
We have another one here. What would the private plan effective date be if, for example, someone applied for a private plan on April 5th and received approval on June 5th?
So I'm happy to take that one. I just want to make sure I'm understanding the question. So what we're really needing for private plans is going to be private plans that will be effective and covering employees on January 1st of 2024. So it really doesn't make a great deal of impact from our perspective, whether we would use that April 5th date or June 5th date in your scenario.
Thank you, Tracy. Question here from Nicole. Will you please go through the steps of creating an account as a TPA and how we go about setting up a profile for each of our payroll clients? Nicole, we have several tools on our website that we can drop here in the chat. On our My Family Plus employer page, we have a how-to video that goes over this process for TPAs, and then specific user guides for TPAs, in addition to quick reference guides that will go over how do you get access to each of your clients as a TPA. Moving down to Deborah, can I change the phone number for the authentication method? It is going to be our main phone. I'm assuming you're talking about login.gov. I'm going to toss that one to Naeem. Naeem, are you available to answer this question about login.gov and the phone method?
Sorry, so is this about the multi-factor authentication? What was the question? I was trying to answer another question. I didn't hear.
The question here is, can I change the phone number for the authentication method? It is going to be our main phone. So my understanding, Deborah, is that if you go in and you set it up with one phone number and you want to change that phone number for authentication, is that possible, Naeem?
Yeah, so basically that does not go through. So that's a process that goes through the login.gov. So they have methods where you can change your different profile information. So yes. It could be doable, but it's through the login.gov, and the links are there on the portal with the help instructions.
Thank you, Naeem. And if, Deborah, you're talking about changing the phone number within your account to your main line, you can do that within My Family Plus employer. A question here from Edward. If you intend to rely on a private plan, is that when a TPA comes into play? Tracy,
no,
you want to take
it's not necessarily when a TPA comes into play. So there may be companies that are using TPAs right now to support them with their payroll services, for example. So those TPAs are able to register their entire client book of business to support those employees if they wish. And as far as private plans are concerned, the marketplace for private plans will be opening in the first to second quarter of next year. So there's not a TPA that's able to support with that at this time. And while I have the opportunity, I do just want to give a clarification to a response we provided around state agencies earlier on. So for state agencies, DPA is working with FAMLI directly to make sure that state agencies have been registered appropriately. So I'm not sure which agency you are from, but we got you.
Thank you for clarifying that, Tracy. I was just about to get to that. Here is another question. Can I add multiple businesses under one account? We have several and each has a separate FEIN.
So each FEIN, I believe, will need to be its own registration. Right. Look, Jude is nodding. That's a good sign. So yes, each FEIN would need to be its own unique registration.
Thank you, Tracy. A question here from Kim. How do payroll service bureaus register? Do we add them as an additional user? Good question. Naeem, do you want to take that one?
Sorry, one more time, Jessica.
This question is from Kim. She's asking if payroll service providers, how do they register, and do the clients as the employer need to add them as an additional user?
So if they're asking about, you know, the user for the employer, right?
They're asking about a payroll service provider as a TPA. How do they register, and will the client as the employer have to?
Oh, I see. Gotcha. Yeah. So we generally expect the TPAs to register the clients, client employers, and that's the best way and easier way. But if the employer does come in and register themselves before the TPA got a chance, then that's doable. But the linking between the TPA and the employer will need an additional step. And there's a link that we can send. One way the linking could happen is when the TPA comes back later and uploads you know, the file, registration file, where they you know, also indicate this particular employer that has pre-registered, then the system will automatically link them. The other way is, of course, today until our next release, the other way is to call the CCR, the contact center, basically, and they will link it manually. But that's not the most preferred way to do it. So these are the multiple options that you have, but I would rely on the TPA to do this.
Thanks, Naeem. And we have all of those quick reference guides and TPA how-to guides on our website. So please refer to those, and we will share those out after this webinar as well, along with a copy of this presentation, the slide deck, and the recording. We have a great question here from Rachel that either Evan or Tracy, if you wouldn't mind grabbing this one. Can we track employee claim status, or is the employer account just for payroll purposes?
So the employer account is just for payroll services. There's going to be a different system that's going to be used for employee claim status. So that's not something that's going to be active until 2024.
We've answered a few of these and other questions. Let's get to this one from Brandy. We are an accounting firm that does payroll for many clients. There are 3 of us plus the owner. Does the owner register the company and then we log in under him, or do we each have our own login for the clients that we serve? Great question. Naeem, feel free to jump in here. But Brandy, you will, one of the 3 of you, plus the owner, you can decide which one, will have to register your payroll company as a TPA. And then you can either bulk upload the clients that you serve, or you can manually upload them as manually upload them in My Family Plus Employer. You can also add the 3 additional users to the same account with different permissions, and those users can add their client accounts, or you can bulk upload them. Naeem,
and we also have a third method, which is the API, if you are inclined to use that as well. But yeah, as Jessica said, if you have a lot of clients, then the bulk upload would be the best and easiest way for you. Otherwise, you can go into the portal and manually enter one by one, or register your clients that way. Thanks.
Thank you, Naeem. We have a question here about private plans that Evan or David, I would love for you to answer. How do transfers work for state to private to private plans? Also, are there penalties that apply for going from the state back to a private plan?
I will allow Evan to weigh in on that.
Thanks for the allowance. So, well, I think broadly, there's no penalty for moving from the state plan to a private plan. Generally, you would just have to pay the private plan application fee, and then you have to pay the annual private plan maintenance fee for your plan. To move from a private plan to a state plan, there are no penalties either. It's where an employer moves from the private plan to the state plan. That's where the employer then has to agree to stay on the state plan and pay 3 years of premiums on the state plan. So that's to basically prevent undue impacts to the fund. And then I guess finally, it would be important to note that as far as approval of benefits, generally it's going to be the plan that approved the benefits pays the benefits. So if a state plan approves continuous leave, and then the employer moves all their workforce over to a private plan, the state will continue to pay that continuous leave benefit. Same is true vice versa. If a private plan approves continuous leave, then if the employer moves to the state plan, the private plan would still pay that benefit. That said, intermittent leave and reduced leave schedule benefits do not survive that shift from plan to plan, or at least do not survive unemployment. And then they would only last as long as they until the recertification requirements on the private plans. I know that's a whole lot. That was like a pretty general question. So if you have some like more specific nuances that we can help you with, certainly happy to do that.
Thanks, Evan. We have a great question here from Laura that we haven't covered yet. Does a part-time or seasonal employee count as one or half of an employee to get to the total number of employees?
I can take that one. It really does depend how many weeks in a calendar year that they work for you. If they work for you 20 or greater weeks, then they are counted as an employee, regardless of whether they work for 1 hour per week or 50 hours per week.
Thank you, Tracy. Here's a similar question from Brenda. If we have employees nationwide, over 400 employees, but only works and lives in Colorado, does the employer still need to contribute employer's contributions? Is it only employee contributions? I'm thinking, Brenda, you meant to say, but only less than 10 work in Colorado. What are your obligations? Tracy, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. So you do count your nationwide headcount to determine whether or not you meet the requirement as a small, less than 10 employee employer or a larger employer. So your entire nationwide headcount is going to be greater than 10 in this instance. So you would be contributing premiums for those employees that are within Colorado.
Thank you, Tracy. Here's a great question from Diana. We are an industrial construction company, and we employ our employees for projects throughout the US. The projects could last anywhere from 72 hours to several months. Are we required to participate in FAMLI? Evan, are you able to take that one?
Yeah, I mean, so the answer is yes, with regard to all of your employees that are Colorado employees, and that's where it gets complicated. We have the in our premiums rules, we have provisions which describe when someone is considered a Colorado employee and when they aren't. And then it gets a little bit complicated when the employees work in different places at different times. So I would encourage you to review those rules and then let me know if you have any specific questions based on that.
Thanks, Evan. Here's one from Jim. For temporary employees furnished by a company to the employer required to collect the 0.45% fee. Our temporary employees furnished by a company to the employer required to collect the 0.45% fee. Apologies, Jim, if I'm not understanding your question, but I think the general question is, how do you handle temporary employees? Evan, do you want to take that?
I mean, sure. I think basically the helpful guidance here is that for temp employees, it's the employer of record that's responsible for collecting any premiums. So if the employer of record is the temp agency, then the client employer of the temp agency wouldn't bear that responsibility. It would be the temp agency themselves, since they're the employer of record.
Thank you, Evan. Naeem, I'm wondering if you can explain again, there's the different options for employers with TPAs. There's several questions about whether the employer needs to register first, whether the TPA can register on their behalf. Again, both options are available to you. You can register as the employer, your TPA can register on your behalf.
Yeah, I can jump in there again. So basically what we say is the best way to go about this is to have the TPA register for you, because they usually have a lot of clients, and they will upload a file with all the clients, and it's a one step upload, and it'll register all the clients that way. And then one of the part of that registration is that the system creates a link between the TPA and the employee, so that the system understands who that employee is represented by. So if you let the TPA do it, then that's probably the best way. But if as an employer, if you go and register yourself before the TPA actually gets the chance, then your account will be registered, but the linking between the TPA and your own employer account will need to happen separately. And one way that can happen is when the TPA can later on come around and upload their file. If they do so, then the system will automatically link that for you, so you don't have to worry about that anymore. But otherwise, the other way is that to call the contact center for now, and they can manually link it for you. So to avoid all that hassle, the best thing for you to do is to let the TPA do it. We don't send out any notification or any guidances that the employers has to register themselves. The TPA should register you, the employers. So that's the long explanation for that answer.
Thanks, Naeem. Apologies, everyone. I promise I'm still here. My light just turned off. And to Naeem's point, the biggest thing here is if you do work with a TPA, we really recommend you communicate with them and get connected with them to see if they will be registering on your behalf. And if they aren't, thank you, Evan, you can go in and register on your own and then get connected later through the contact center as Naeem suggested.
Right.
Let's see here. We have a question here specific about wage reports and premiums, and one of my colleagues just answered it, so it disappeared. Laura, is there a web-based app for the authentication app, or does it have to be on a cell? Good question. That's in regards to login .gov, and I believe there's the option to use an authentication app. Naeem, feel free to jump in if anyone knows off the top of my head. Yep, authentication application is here on your screen.
Yep.
So you are able to use that with login.gov. Let's see, I'm scrolling down through more questions. A question here from Nancy about job protection. Just to clarify, I thought the job protection only applies after completing 180 days of employment, roughly 6 months. Is that not correct? That is correct. Evan, feel free to jump in, but your employees will have job protection under FAMLI after they work for you for 180 days. Correct.
Yeah. Just to clarify, the job protection benefit does require someone to be with an employer for 180 days. And that benefit just means that the employee is entitled to return to the same or equivalent position upon their return from leave. However, that's separate from protection from discrimination, retaliation, or interference. And all employees get those protections from day one. And employees have a number of rights under FAMLI other than just using the benefit. So if, for example, an employee was talking to other employees about their family rights and the employer didn't like it and the employer fired them for that, that would be a violation of the law regardless of how long the employee was there. So yes, that specific return to the same or equivalent position right doesn't kick in until 180 days, but the right to be free from discrimination and retaliation is something enjoyed by all workers regardless of how long they've been with a particular employer.
Thanks, Evan. There's a couple questions coming in about S corps and shared ownership. If an S corp owner has a spouse on payroll, are they considered employees? There's another question also. 2 employees are owner operators of the business. Do we need to withhold from them as well, or are they considered self-employed and participation be optional? Evan, do you want to take these?
Sure. I mean, so we can't give, particular individualized answers because these questions literally are case by case. And that's because it really turns on whether or not you're an employer and whether or not these individuals are employees. That's really where the action is. And the FAMLI definition of employee is very broad, and it includes most workers in the state. There is a 2-part exception, and that is that an individual is not an employee if 2 things are true. 1, they're free from controlling the performance of their work, and 2, that work is part of their own independent business or trade. And so that's the question that employers will have to answer, for themselves and for their workers across the board. It will be the case often that business owners satisfy both prongs of that exception and will not be considered employees, and therefore aren't covered by FAMLI and don't trigger any employer obligations with regard to that person. However, some people with ownership stakes can still be considered employees if they answer to somebody else, if they are subject to somebody else's control or right to control their performance, then they would still be an employee regardless of the fact that they might have a small ownership stake. So basically, again, it's a case-by-case analysis, but if you're a business without employees, then we're not going to consider you an employer. And to determine whether or not you're an employee, you really just have to apply that general definition and that more narrow 2-part exception.
Thank you, Evan. There's a couple questions about templates for TPAs. We have all of those templates available on our TPA page. I'll have Michelle, looks like she already has dropped that into the chat here. So if you are a TPA and looking for those templates, go use that link. More questions about S corps. Here's a question, Naeem, for you and potentially Jude. We are a TPA and did not use the bulk registration for creating our account. How can we delete the accounts and start over? Is that an option?
Yeah, so if they have not used the bulk load and they've manually updated, then there's that's they're good already. I mean, the bulk load is an option, not a requirement. So if what they have in the system is good, then there's nothing else to do. But however, I'll just say say this, that if they do go back later on and upload a bulk file, specifying the same date range, and then basically the system will take the bulk option and override what they have before. So I would say that if they're happy with what they have entered by hand, then just leave it as is. They're good.
Yes, you won't need to delete the account and start over. You'll have options and whether you want to manually upload or bulk upload. And if you have questions about what's already in your account, please reach out to our contact center and they can help you, Connie. Here's a question from Crystal. I work in a volatile industry. We have employees that have only worked for a week and then leave. Do they need to be included in the employee count? Evan, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but employees are counted on your total head count if they have been on your payroll for 20 or more calendar weeks. So if they've only worked for less than a week, then they wouldn't impact your total head count. Correct, Evan?
Yep, that's right.
Thank you. Another question here from Jeff. Are seasonal staff from out of state required to pay the premium? If they are only working in Colorado for 9 weeks and returning to their home state, they will never be able to utilize the program. Evan, can you take that?
There is no exemption for seasonal workers, so they could use the program. They might need time off. So yes, if you have a seasonal worker, then you would have to pay premiums for that worker. You are allowed to collect premiums. The employees share from that worker, and that worker can apply for benefits.
Thanks, Evan. Here's a question from Esther. Would a company equity partners, would they be considered self-employed workers or as employees? Company equity partners.
I mean, again, this is case by case. So if they satisfy the two-prong exception to the definition of employee, that is, if they are primarily free from control and direction in the performance of their work, and the work that they're doing is part of their independent business or trade, then they're not an employee. If both of those things aren't true, then they are an employee.
Here's one from Rose. We are a Colorado company, but we have one employee that works in a different state. Does this employee have to be part of the FAMLI program, or is this employee excluded from FAMLI?
It sounds like if this person works completely out of state, then they're not covered by the FAMLI program. Yeah, if there's one easy rule to rest on, that's if you never work in Colorado, then you're not covered by FAMLI, regardless of where your employer is based.
And here's one from Wendy. Do we pay the employer portion or deduct the employee portion of a 1099 temporary employee?
So that's it's a misnomer to call 1099s employees. People classify workers on a 1099 basis to consider them independent contractors, i.e. non-employees. However, it's not a surprise to anybody on this call that it's pretty prevalent across the state that a lot of employers misclassify their employees as 1099 workers in order to avoid obligations. So again, it's going to depend on whether or not that individual worker meets the general definition of employee under the Family Act, and more importantly, whether or not they satisfy that two-prong exception. But I will say that many workers classified as 1099 workers are really just employees who have been misclassified by their employers. Some aren't. So again, go back to that definition, and that's the answer.
Thanks, Evan. And it looks like we are 10 minutes over. Everyone, I know we have questions that we weren't able to get to. We will include some of the common themes in a recording that we will send out next week. This recording as is will be sent out later today. Again, we also have another live webinar later this month that you can participate in, and you can reach out to us via email or our contact center if you have additional questions that you want to get answered right away. I'll put that back up on screen. But with that, I will hand it over to Tracy for final comments.
Thanks so much, Jessica, and thanks to our team. Again, we look forward to hearing from you, and please take this opportunity to go and get registered on the My Family Plus employer site. Thank you so much. Have a good rest of your day.